Thornburgh, President and CEO of the Committee of 70, talking to you from our world headquarters down here on South Broad Street. And this is another interview with Studio C70, where we've extended invitations to city council candidates to stop by and talk to you, the voters of Philadelphia, about the upcoming election, their campaign, and why they deserve your vote. We do have an election coming up on November 15th. That's November 5th. You'd think I'd know. And we're going to be electing, in addition to council candidates, a mayor, judges at the local level and at the state level. So try to put aside all of the noise from Washington and for the next few weeks, concentrate on what's going on here at home, because it makes a big difference. Right now, it's my pleasure to be joined by Councilman Derek Green. Councilman, thanks for joining us.
Yes, I didn't realize you had a international world headquarters in Studio C70.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I mean, this is reaching people all over.
The green room is lovely. You got great stuff. You should see what's back there. It's phenomenal.
Nothing but the best. So thanks again for being here. And just start off with, I was saying to someone earlier, every pollster's favorite question, which is, in your view, is the city on the right track or the wrong track? And then second part of that question is what's going right and what's going wrong? What's taking us on the right track and what's leading us on the wrong track?
Well, that's a loaded question, right track, wrong track. I would say it's slightly on the right track. And I kind of go up and down on how high or low we're going on the right track. I mean, we're definitely making some improvements as a city. When you look at our center city core, you see a lot of development, you see a lot of energy. You have people moving the city. When I graduated from the University of Virginia in the early 90s, a lot of my friends and people I grew up with went away to other cities, some internationally. Many more people who are young people who are coming to Philadelphia from other cities are staying in Philadelphia. So that's a good thing. We've had a lot of growth in our hospitality industry in the center city. Jobs are coming here. We have also, we started to reduce our poverty rate a little bit. We're now down to 25%. We've actually increased population. So we are making movements in the right direction, but we're not doing it fast enough. And I think that's why I measure when I say right track.
So we're on the right track, but we're not going fast enough.
Exactly. And someone made the analogy, I'm trying to remember, is as if you are in your car, and when you look in your rearview mirror, you see how far we've come. But when you're looking your left and right passenger side, you see other cities going past us. So we've come a long way from where we are, but we're behind where other cities are going. And so that's why I think we're moving in the right direction, but not going fast enough.
What are some of the things that concern you that you would suggest that maybe there are brakes on our speed?
Well, one of the issues is education and jobs. I mean, I think we are bringing people to the city of Philadelphia. People want to be in Philadelphia, but we're not bringing enough jobs. When you look at our peer cities, they've done a much better job coming out of this great recession from 2008 and bringing jobs to their cities. We have not been doing that same level of job growth. So that's a concern. And also on the education side, as someone who has a child in a school district and a mother who taught in a school district for about 31 years, and I see the issues we're having with asbestos in our schools and other issues in reference to just basic functions, that really challenges me and concerns me, because when someone gets together, they have a couple come together, they get married or party, they decide to have a child, and we're looking at their next step in reference to education, they're not as likely to look at our local school district because of some of the challenges and the stuff people read about in the paper.
Right. Tie your comment about the city's positive but still sort of measured job growth to your first term in city council. I know prior to council you had some experience in the private sector, and so you have a feel for the fact that what city government does matters, but there are always other things at play. But if you think about this as you're ending your first 4-year term as a council at large member, what's the sort of highlight reel of the things that you've been a part of in this past 4 years that maybe have kept the city on track, has added to a little gas in the tank, a little foot in the accelerator in terms of the of the economic environment and job growth?
Well, one of the first things I've done in the city since I came into council, and because I do have a business background, having started my career when I came out of University of Virginia at Meridian Bank as a small business lender, is to really try to focus on poverty. And I think that one of the ways we get out of the poverty rate we have in our city is by growing out of poverty, by growing jobs and small businesses. So one of the first initiatives I did was create a Philadelphia Business Lending Network, which is kind of like a lending tree for small businesses and a partnership between the private sector and lenders and the city. Whereas if you go to the city website through the Commerce Department and you apply through the Philadelphia Business Lending Network, your application is then sent to our network of about 30 different lenders, and they'll look at your application and then they'll respond back to the internet through the Commerce Department. Are those lenders are interested in giving you a loan, and then the Commerce Department will connect you with them electronically. So it's kind of like a lending tree for small businesses. And some of the lenders I've talked to, like a United Bank, they've done loans to small businesses that they never would have done but for the lending network. Right. So I think providing access to credit is one thing I've done to try to help move the needle and help grow small businesses. I've also co-chaired our Regulatory Reform and Review Committee with our Commerce Director, Harold Ebbets, and the president of the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, Rob Wonderling, to really change the dynamic of businesses in the city of Philadelphia and to really look at some of the regulations we have. We've actually repealed a lot of bills. I'm probably one of the few elected officials who've probably repealed more bills than I passed. And we're trying to get antiquated legislation out of the code and also start to look at regulations that really impact. And so what we've tried to do is look at some pilots. One pilot is specifically focused on restaurants because a restaurant is more likely to deal with revenue, license inspection, and health, and look at a pilot that kind of brings those departments together to communicate more effectively using cut like a Salesforce type tool, so that way we can communicate among departments and also communicate better to the customer. One of the things I've often said is that the city of Philadelphia, we are an attraction and retention business. Those cities that do a great job of retaining constituents and retaining businesses, as well as attracting businesses and attracting constituents, those are the cities that are on the leading edge around the world. And so we hope through this committee and some of the other things I've done will help to change the paradigm regarding small businesses in the city of Philadelphia and help us address poverty by growing businesses.
Well, I suspect you'd agree with me, but back in the days when we called that tax the business privilege tax, it made the point that somehow having your own business was a privilege.
Right, that's why they changed the name.
And you know, I have a long interest in small business and entrepreneurship and so forth. I was out at the 30th anniversary of the Enterprise Center a couple weeks ago, which I was integrally involved in starting when I was working at Wharton. And it reminds me of the comment that you made about the rearview mirror and looking to the left of it. On the one hand, you know, a place like the Enterprise Center has done extraordinary work in kind of building a culture of entrepreneurship, and they have that food incubator out there. And yet, you know, the numbers are still pretty daunting in terms of where we have to go. So, and the other point is the, you know, again, back in my small business days, and I suspect you'd agree, from a small business standpoint, you know, you want this to be as seamless and almost invisible a presence as possible. Yes, we need to have, you know, L&I and health and whoever watching and making sure that we keep people safe. And yet, if it becomes too intrusive, it becomes so. I'll get off my soapbox here.
Well, no, I'm on that same soapbox.
You're sympathetic to all of it.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, my wife and I've had a small business at one point. It was a ladies' shoe store on Germantown Avenue. It's part of the reason why I don't have as much hair as I used to. That's a separate conversation. But it really gave me exposure to the challenges of a retail business on a commercial corridor. And so that's why I try to focus on how can we grow our commercial corridor businesses and our small businesses. Because if a small business on a Germantown Avenue or Frankfurt Avenue can grow, then more likely than not, they're going to be able to add additional employees who then can maybe even buy a home or invest in an existing home, which provides more dollars for our school district. So these are all interconnected. And the fact that when Pew did their study and showed that 2% of the businesses owned in the city of Philadelphia are owned by African Americans, and we're looking at a 43 to 45% population of African Americans in the city of Philadelphia. That shows you right there the poverty and the impact it has citywide.
Yeah. Well, and just to pile on, it's occurred to us in the history of this country, history of the world, maybe there's no better way to accumulate wealth than by growing a business, passing it,
Transfer wealth.
passing it on to your children, using that equity to send your kid to college or whatever. And absent that opportunity, it's pretty tough.
Right, that's true.
So I'm with you. So now you stand for re-election. I guess I'll ask you another sort of pretty basic, straightforward question, which is, how would you make the case to the voters that you deserve another 4 years?
Well, I look at myself not so much as an elected official or a city council member, but really a city employee who was fortunate enough to be hired by thousands of people around the city of Philadelphia. I try to get out of City Hall as much as possible because you can't really see what's happening in our city if you're in City Hall every day. So that's why my staff kind of gets mad at me, because I may be the Great Northeast, South Philadelphia, Southwest, the Northwest, North Philadelphia, really seeing what's happening in our city. And to me, the biggest issue I see is poverty. That's why I spend so much time trying to address poverty by growing small businesses. And so hopefully the voters in the city of Philadelphia on November 5th,
Sorry about
almost
that.
got me, November 5th, will,
we're both guilty as charged.
November 5th will rehire me for another 4 years to continue the work that I've been doing, like the Philadelphia Business Lending Network, like some of the regulatory reform. In fact, on the ballot on November 5th is another piece of legislation that I introduced and passed called a Local Business Purchasing Initiative to make it easier for small businesses to do business with the city of Philadelphia. I think the city should be doing more procurement with local-based businesses. Now, granted, they have to do business with businesses that are providing a good product and a good service, but why not look at businesses here in the city of Philadelphia that are doing that? Because the resources that our procurement officials are using to buy those goods and services come from taxpayers like you and me. So we can work with our local businesses and they can grow, and by the procurement dollars they're getting from the city of Philadelphia, that helps to recycle those dollars in our city to help them grow and grow our base of businesses and grow jobs and hopefully reduce our taxes going forward.
That reminds me, we've talked about some of the things that are sort of more on square on our agenda. We'll call them a bunch of good government things, campaign finance. We've supported term limits fairly recently. We're interested in opening up primary elections to independent voters, which would have to be a state level change, would have a great impact here. Councilmanic prerogative. Just interested in your comment on those sort of basket of issues and where you think where your interests are in those issues. What difference does it make to the larger city and where we headed on some of those?
Well, as we talked earlier, the turnout we believe will probably below 20%.
I always like to start by saying I think everybody's going to come out to vote, because you don't want to like calibrate expectations too low.
Let me strike that. So we'll have a great turnout.
Right.
But in case we don't,
that's right.
Some of the things that you talked about are things I think will help to change the perspective of the electorate regarding getting involved in elections. So I introduced legislation regarding public financing of elections. Before I even came to city council, when I was a council staffer, I had hearings regarding public financing of elections. So I've done a lot of research in that regard. I think it's something that hopefully if I can get my bill out of committee, then it can get on the ballot in the spring to really have a question to the voters in the city of Philadelphia. Should we have public financing elections? Just asking that question generally, and then from there we'll go to the next step of how you bring in that type of system. Some of the other ideas like ranked choice voting is something that I've had some conversations about. Through my research, we can't do that at a local level. That has to be done at the Harrisburg level. So we've been talking with some elected officials at the state level to look at that type of reform. Some of the other things you've talked about are things I'm also interested in, because I think when we look at all these issues, we've got to find ways to get people more engaged in the political process. When Wilson Goode got elected mayor, we had hundreds of thousands of more people actually participated than in this past primary this past May. So things that we can do in reducing money in elections, making it easier for people to be engaged, I think that we should look at going forward. And hopefully these are things that we can get done if I'm fortunate enough to get elected for another term.
I read an article the other day about the incredible power that older voters have in our system generally,
Right.
because
Or,
they show up,
right.
they're
Right.
registered, and they show
Exactly.
up.
Right. Or my dad would say seasoned
Seasoned.
voters. Right. He's like, I'm not a senior citizen. I'm a
Right.
seasoned citizen.
Right.
So.
But you know, if you think about it, elections are about the future,
Mm-hmm.
and we should be, in my view, we should be concerned that we don't have enough younger people
Mm-hmm.
participating in the process, and then we're making. I say to I've said to my students, if you're okay with your grandparents making decisions about who runs the city, fine, stay home. Otherwise, you better get out there.
That's actually a good talking
You
point.
know,
I'm actually going to use that because I think
all yours.
people don't realize that,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
such a large electorate, you know, unfortunately elected officials, they focus on who's voting and who votes historically. So the messages are going to be tailored to those groups. So saying to people who are younger or millennials and saying, listen, if you like how things are going, then
Yeah.
don't participate. But if you want to see a change,
Yeah.
you should get engaged.
Yeah.
I mean, I often talked to friends, and I think of my niece who had a beauty salon, and I would say to her, listen, you have a beauty salon on Germantown Avenue, and if you're concerned about the things in reference to regulations regarding how you maintain your beauty salon and the regulation at the state level, you should get some of the other salon owners on Germantown Avenue and talk to your state representative because because the decisions that they're making and the bodies in Harrisburg from a regulatory perspective impact you every day. And so I try to explain how, you know, politics is involved in your life from as you're born from a birth certificate to as you pass and death certificate and everything in between.
That's right. Well, listen, let me just close with I'll call it sort of a guardrail question,
Okay.
which maybe will give some people a sense of sort of where you are on a host of issues. And the question is this: are there ideas, policies, proposals in which you would never support, no matter what? Alternatively, are there ideas, proposals, initiatives that you would always support?
Another loaded question. Never support, I would say, you know, that's hard because there are areas that, I mean, I tend to never say never, but there are issues that I definitely have some significant concerns when you look at issues regarding gun violence and those issues. So anything that's going to help promote Second Amendment issues, from my perspective, is a real concern because we have too many guns in our city and in our Commonwealth. I think we have a bad interpretation of the Second Amendment from my perspective. We don't have militias, but somehow that's been interpreted in the Second Amendment in a much broader way. But that's how the Constitution is done. So from my perspective, you know, those type of issues that to me,
So you would always support, let's say, legislation that, okay.
Gun control.
Yeah.
That's I'm just trying to think because for me it's really hard for me to specifically say something I would never
people
do.
Like to leave themselves
Right.
some room to maneuver.
But gun control is probably one that I could not see myself, you know, trying to increase the number of guns because it's such an issue from a violence perspective in our city, from public safety. We have too many guns. If you look at other countries, from Sweden to Japan, you know, industrialized nations who don't have not even close to number of guns. I remember, I think it was a stat I heard recently that Stockholm had like 1 death last year or 2 deaths, but that's from natural causes, not from gun violence.
So that's what you would always support, a proposal, a reasonable proposal that, how about on the never side?
Still never. It's hard. It's hard for me to. Never. It's hard for me to specifically say because I'm a big proponent of never saying never. But I would say I would never support issues that really would not support the general city as a whole. And I think I try to balance things. I have friends on multiple sides and multiple issues and multiple sides of the aisle to say, and you know, people will be surprised that people that I have conversations with on a regular basis are either very, very progressive or slightly more conservative. So I try to get perspectives from a lot of different ways. So it's hard to say never.
Okay.
I'll just say
spoken like a true lawyer.
I'll say well, that's true. I'll say I'll never say never.
Okay.
I'm always open to the conversation.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate
Green. Good. Once again, Election Day, November 5th. That's November 5th. Polls open at 7, close at 8. Still time to apply for an absentee ballot, which you can now do online, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And in the meanwhile, if you want to learn more about the issues, the candidates, the mechanics of the process, you can go to our website at www.w70.org. And you can also download our We Vote app, so you can have everything you need in the palm of your hand to help you and your friends, neighbors, relatives, and children, as long as they're over 18, navigate their way to Election Day. So look forward to seeing you on November 5th, and thanks for joining us.